Hi guys! Before I start this chapter, I just want to let you know that I had the honor to sit down with Drake, who plays Rung in A Tale of a Thousand Stars TV series. And the episode is out now on our podcast channel, Lovecast, the BL podcast. So go check that out. I had a really good time. And on with the chapter. Chapter 8. The new volunteer teacher woke up late, as he had announced. It was 9:30 a.m. when he came to because of the heat from the sun that was burning through the roof. Tien got up and stretched lazily. The man that had been laying next to him last night was already gone, perhaps back to his camp. It didn't matter. He didn't care that much anyway. As he picked up his towel and toothbrush, his eyes caught the sporty traveling bag that the captain had brought with him. He cocked his eyebrow, puzzled, and rushed down the stairs to look at the space under the hut. He saw dishes of salted egg, canned fermented Chinese cabbage, and the cold boiled rice on the litter, all of the familiar, simple food. Still, there was no sign of the man he was looking for. Where the hell did he go? Tien headed towards the earthen jar at the back of his house. He was still thankful that someone had filled in the jar for him every morning. He undressed, leaving only a boxer on, and put the clothes on the toilet door frame that stood not too far away, and proceeded to brush his teeth. It was late morning, so the temperature was warm enough for him to take a cold bath. He picked up the plastic bowl and scooped up the cold water and splashed it all over his body. He did it with ease, comparing to the first day, and thought to himself that he'd got used to it in no time. The black charcoal soap made bubbles and gave off a jasmine fragrance that made him feel freshen up every time he used it. He pushed the bar under his boxers and poured the water inside until it got totally cleaned. Even if there was no one around, he still had enough decency to keep his clothes on and not stay butt naked and get the mountain and forest spirits to curse at him. Tien lifted the towel from the door to dry himself before wrapping it around his waist. He pulled the wet boxers down and put on the same t-shirt. His bath was done. The young man whistled as he went up into the hut to rummage through his backpack. Then he let out a loud curse.
Fuck! I've run out of clothes.
The wealthy young man pulled at his hair. He finally wore all of the clothes he'd brought on the journey after 1 week. What now? He didn't know how to manually wash the clothes, and there was no detergent around.
What's wrong with you? You're constipated, or did the toilet get clogged?
The officer who had just returned asked, seeing the younger man hunch with his hands over his head as if someone had just died.
Worse!
The prudent, stylish guy, who was close to breaking down and crying, said in a broken voice.
I have no more clean clothes to wear.
Once he finished the sentence, the captain almost wanted to jump out the hut.
So, you wash your clothes. It's as simple as that. That's not simple. I don't know how to wash clothes.
Fufa slapped his forehead not too gently. How could he forget that this city boy didn't know how to do shit, except playing with an expensive mobile phone? He shook his head in exasperation and walked to pick some spare clothes from his sporty traveling bag.
You can wear mine. I'll take you down to the waterfall later.
Tien looked at the wrinkled, faded green khaki t-shirt with Fra Piran, or the god of rain, holding a discus embroidered symbol, the namesake of the operating base, and a pair of football sweatpants with a loose, elastic waist, and scowled.
You want me to wear these?
Back at his family house, they'd have to think twice before using them as rags.
If you want to go bare ass, be my guest.
The captain was going to put the clothes back, but Tien was grabbing at them to have a closer look.
This is a military garment. I'm not a soldier. Will I be accused if I wear them? No, you won't. Soldiers' wives wear them all the time.
The words were unnervingly simple and straightforward. Red hues crept up the smooth cheeks.
I'm not your wife,
Thien shouted, wanting to kick the neck of the massive monster, if only he could reach the height. Fufa shrugged and turned towards the door.
Get dressed. I'm going to wait to have breakfast with you under the hut.
The deep, deadpan voice irked the younger man. If he was just a small child, he would be stomping his feet right now that someone hadn't bent over his will. Thien pulled out his t-shirt and reluctantly put on the captain's. The tea was old and faded, yet it carried the sweet, clean scent of detergent and sunlight that was both refreshing and warm. He shook his head, pushing away the nonsense, and ran down the hut to meet the other man who had waited for him on the litter. The cold rice was warm again after the captain had reheated it on the brazier. The white smokes rose up from the fluffy rice with jasmine scent. The city boy didn't wait and scooped up the rice with the spoon to munch on with salted eggs. Fufa watched the starving boy and smiled to himself, amused. He was sitting cross-legged, in a faded tee and wrinkled pants and tousled hair. If he saw himself in the mirror, hell would break loose. Once they finished the breakfast, Captain Fufa took the volunteer teacher to borrow a plastic basin from Kalma Biengle to put in the worn clothes. They walked kilometers to reach the waterfall and heard the thunderous sound from the cliff as the water hit the basin below. Thien wanted to have another bath right there. In the near distance, a group of young Aka girls from the village were washing their clothes by putting them on a boulder on the river bank and step on with their feet. They were giggling as they saw two men approach before giving them shy smiles. Fufa nodded back as a greeting and took the troublesome brat to the spot further down the river. Thien slumped the heavy basin on the large slab of rock, grimacing at the massive officer.
Captain, I don't think these clothes can bear the weight of my feet. If the villagers' cheap, hand-woven clothes can bear it, then yours can. Why did you spend thousands of baht on them, then?
Fufa crouched down and started piling up the colorful clothes from the basin on the rock.
Different fabrics for different usage, you know?
The city boy put his hands on his hips, ready to fight back.
I'm serious, Cap. I don't have time for your sarcasm. Use your hands, then.
The captain pulled down the boy's hand to sit down next to him.
Slowly wet the soap in the water.
Thien grudgingly did what he was told. As he soaked the clothes in the water, he couldn't help but came up with a question.
Why did you bring the soap? Why not a detergent? Our ancestors used vinegar to wash the clothes. This soap has natural ingredients and is eco-friendly. If it cleans your body, why can't it clean your clothes?
The city boy hummed as a response. He rubbed the soap on his clothes until it made bubbles, then clumsily scrubbed the fabric by hand. It looked so awkward that the captain of the company had to issue another order.
Hold it tight and rub your hands against each other. Scrub the soap on the stain.
Thien scrubbed the wet clothes, frustrated, until he heard the stitch break. Everything went silent. The almond eyes widened as if the man was in utter shock, followed by a loud whine as if he was being traumatized.
Fuck! My topman shirt! It's you!
He jumped on his feet, flinging the pricey, colorful shirt towards the massive officer who was sitting down and sending white bubbles with the refreshing jasmine scent into the other man's tanned, handsome face. Captain Fufa slowly rose to his full height. The dark shadow that rose along with him made Thien step back. Rough, thick hand wiped away the bamboo charcoal suds from his cheekbone. intense dark eyes fixating on the younger man, who became paralyzed, swallowing thickly.
It was your fault. You can't put the blame on me,
Tien said lamely, but it didn't help.
I'm not going to blame you.
Fufa growled darkly, then came a thunderous howl.
I'm going to punish you!
Tien startled and threw the wet shirt into the captain's face as he was about to lunge at him. It made things even worse. The young officer yanked the expensive shirt and threw it on the ground, uncaring if it became damaged. He grabbed the brat's wrist, wanting to spank him until he asked for forgiveness. Yet the boy was as nimble as a monkey, jumping into the river and trotting further until the water that surrounded his knees breaking into waves. Fufa, who had longer legs, caught up with him. The younger man had to employ a new tactic by turning around to face his enemy and splashed the water at the officer at close range. The older man held up his arms to protect his face instinctively, but he still got the water in his face.
This is how you're going to play? All right then.
Fufa stripped off his t-shirt and used it as a shield. He then jumped at the boy and locked him around the torso.
Ouch! I can't breathe!
What a monster! Tien wriggled, trying to twist the strong muscular arms that were holding around his waist away from him. His effort was in vain, and Captain Fufa started giving him a punishment by tickling him at the waist. Tien, who was sensitive to the touch, screamed out and slouched down as all his strength was leaving him. The younger man was enraged that the officer had found out about his other weakness. He decided to resort to a woman's tactic by digging his nails into the hard arms. It worked. Fufa shook his arms loose, feeling the pain shoot into his two limbs, and yet he followed the rascal relentlessly. The war went on as the two grown men threw water at each other as if they were two kids until they both got soaking wet. Tien took his turn to attack and lunged for a close-quarter combat. He threw himself at the thick waist from behind and started tickling the six-packs. Still, it worked as well as using a lath to lift up a boulder, because it didn't work on the captain. The monster slowly turned around and growled at him, baring the fangs.
Too bad. I'm not ticklish. So you're hardened all over, aren't you? Haven't had enough?
Fufa charged at the smart-ass guy like a rugby player. The slighter man was lifted up in the air, and Tien shrieked, twisting his legs around the captain's torso like a python. They both fell backward. The clear water splashed in the air and fell on both young men, soaking them all over. Fufa let out a soft sigh. He twisted around to be underneath the slim boy, otherwise Tien would have broken bones. The man straddling over him pushed up, feeling as if he had been kicked in the guts. When he realized what was serving him as a cushion, he blurted out, panicked.
Did you crack your skull?
He didn't care that much about the other man, but the basin was full of rocks. He didn't want to become a murderer at this young age.
My skull is intact, but my body isn't. Get off me, you heavy butt.
Instead of following the order, the troublemaker let out a loud laugh.
What are you laughing at?
Seeing the captain scowl, Tien's smile split into a wider grin.
You look like a wet dog.
The naked tan skin, the wet hair that plastered against the shapely head, and the man who laid on his back in the water. The man was a sea lion. He even liked to bare his white fangs just like the animal. The glistening almond eyes that narrowed as Tien looked at him gave Fufa some inexplicable goosebumps. What was going on inside the head couldn't be good. He snorted, frustrated, and lifted his slender form off of him.
Stop fooling around. Go wash your clothes and finish it now. Yes, sir, Captain. What a fussy man.
Tien gave him a mocking salute, lingering around for a brief moment before reluctantly returning to the piles of wet clothes. The sun was high above their heads when the two men were heading back from the waterfall. The glaring sun in the noon helped warm up the cold breeze that touched the wet skin. They were walking on the route that cut through the center of the village, adorably wet, making the older folks look and laugh at them.
"Why is it so crowded and busy today? Or they take a weekend off from farming too?"
The Bangkokian asked, amazed. Normally, the villagers would start their day at dawn break and return home only when the sun set. But now they were all over the place.
"They're preparing for a wedding,"
the captain answered plainly, but that made Tien's eyes grow wide.
"You went to see Uncle Biangle yesterday so you could ask for the hand of his daughter?"
The intense eyes glanced at the troublemaker, who was acting as if he was in shock and felt like giving him a kick in the butt. He said, exasperated,
"Kama Biangle has just the sons."
Tien snorted, muttering not too quietly,
"Isn't that what you like? What are you grumping about? Hurry up."
Fufa pulled the lean arms that were carrying the plastic basin towards Kama's house. They'd ask for dry clothes to change before they caught a fever. Villagers flocked to the house of the village's head to ask for advice about the wedding for a young man who would be traveling to another village to ask for a hand of a girl into marriage. They sat on a mattress on an open space that acted as a living room on the second floor and merrily chatted among themselves until the newcomers walked up the stairs. Two soaking men called for the house owner, not wanting to wet the floor. As soon as Kama Biangle saw who the visitors were, he hurriedly got up and placed a towel down on the floor for them to clean their feet.
"Did you go for a swim?"
Both rivals looked at each other, glaring, and another staring contest began. The elder had to suppress his laugh, seeing the stern officer and the new teacher acting childlike.
"The cab felt that the temperature was too hot for him,"
Tien said sarcastically, and the retort from the captain was just humorless.
"I'm cold."
Silence fell over. Biangle cleared his throat before another Cold War started.
"So you need new clothes to change, is that it?"
He knew because when the two came to ask for a plastic basin to put in the used clothes, the teacher was already wearing a soldier's green t-shirt. Now, soaking wet, it was apparent that they didn't have any dry clothes to change.
"Let me fetch my son's clothes for you." "Sorry for the trouble, Kama,"
Fufa said, being considerate of Kama's feeling, and dragged the rascal who became the scrutiny target as he stood with a wet t-shirt plastering on his skin. Tien was hugging his knees on the litter, shuddering every time the cold breeze touched his skin, while the other man appeared intact. Purple Lips sneered, feeling annoyed by the captain.
"You said you were cold. What I'm seeing is someone who isn't disturbed by anything."
The captain's sharp eyes glanced at the younger man who was being cynical. Then he let out a sardonic smile.
"My heart's cold."
Tien went speechless. Once his brain processed the words, he was acting as if he was throwing up.
"Ugh, I want to throw up."
The young captain shrugged, indifferent to the disgust coming from the other. He approached and took the clothes from Kama Biangle, who came just in time, then thanked the elderly man and excused to return to the hut to change. The shy Bangkokian took up the whole room to change while the officer was flinging the wet clothes under the hut. After Tien had dried off his hair and body, he turned to pick up the new clothes to wear. But he came to a sudden halt as he took a look and saw that it was a hand-woven cotton, indigo shirt with colorful embroideries at the hem, and a cropped pants with a drawstring. The young man grimaced, feeling awkward. He didn't take a look when he was given the clothes, so now what? The cold air that blew in the hut helped him make up his mind. Tien pushed down his nervousness and put on the Aka clothes as quickly as he could before the cold crippled him. He lifted the basin that contained the washed clothes and put it on the window frame one by one, then hung the rest to dry in the wind on the tiny balcony. Fufa, who had just changed into the new clothes, looked up and was taken aback. He held back his laugh until his jaw hurt and got a glare from the man who was shaking the wetness from the clothes.
"Which hill are you plucking your carrots, bro?"
The lean, tall form with the smooth, fair complexion, with the effeminate beauty and a modern haircut, couldn't fit with the ethnic clothes at all. Yet, the gap between being a city boy and a hill tribe had already shortened.
"The same hill as yours."
Tien wanted to throw the basin at the captain. Even if Fufa was wearing similar woven clothes, the officer's was a boatneck shirt that fit him better. Taking a better look, Tien wanted to bite his lips from jealousy. The tall, muscular form gave the officer an ethnic warrior look rather than being a carrot farm boy that he was. Such an injustice.
"Are you done hanging the clothes? Do you want to help them out or lounging around here?"
The captain shouted, asking. The bright eyes expressed a hesitation.
"You mean the wedding? What about you?" "I've already given Kama my word since the morning."
Tien went quiet, taking a good look around the empty room in the small hut. He found out life would be a bore if he stayed here the whole day without internet.
"I'll go with you. Wait a sec,"
he told before disappearing into the room to take his after-meal medicines before he'd forget. On the wide open yard next to the edge of the woods, the men were carrying bamboo stalks and laid them down on the ground. Some cut it with a big knife into strips to make a raft. Kama Bienglei beckoned the two men who had just arrived to join in. He was smiling widely, seeing how well their native tribal clothes fit the two guys.
"Are you comfortable in the clothes? My wife made this for our son when he turned 15. Sorry that it was stored away for quite some time, though."
Tien simply smiled as he saw how proud the older man was. He hoped he wasn't being told that he was as big as a junior high student with a buzz cut.
"You're saying he's grown up so big?" "As big as the captain."
Bienglei laughed happily, talking about his beloved son who had just enrolled into a university in downtown Shanghai. Boy would return home only during the school vacation.
"Guess he was also fed a buffalo when he was a kid."
The city boy whined, seeing the broad, strong shoulders that fit the name of the massive officer. The said captain and the commander of the company was chatting with the other villagers who spoke some Thai on the other side of the yard.
"We're making a pelican to carry the bride from a village in the mountains next to ours."
A pelican? Tien was looking up at the word in his head.
"You mean the seat with carriers?" "Yes. The seat must be able to hold both the groom and the bride." "It needs many men, then?" "Quite many. 4 in the front, 4 in the back. If they don't walk in unison, the pelican will topple down."
The village head said jokingly, yet it wouldn't be funny to the lovebirds. The route through the forest and the dirt road was rough and winding, and the carriers must transport both the litter, the bride, and the groom. It was quite a task. Tien nodded half-heartedly. Kama Bienglei asked him to use the knife to scrape off splinters while the captain enthusiastically helped building the litter. 3 hours later, the wooden pelican started to form a shape. The men were connecting the beam by inserting a fat stalk of bamboo underneath the litter and tied it tightly with hemp ropes. 8 strong men, who would be the haulers, took their spots in order to test the palanquin. The voices as they raised the vehicle rang in unison across the woods. Sometimes one of them lost the balance and the litter nearly toppled. Seeing their reddened faces from the weight of the wood, Tien couldn't help but wanting them to succeed. "Is it necessary to carry that thing on the shoulder?" he murmured to himself, but Kama Bienglei, who stood nearby, heard it.
Not necessary. The point is to honor the bride by going and welcoming them to the groom's village. That she doesn't have to come on foot would suffice. The Akka village near the city even has asphalt roads and trucks to do so. So it'd be good enough if you lift the palanquin up at the arm level.
Fa Pandao's village head turned towards the young city boy, eyes wide with a sudden realization. That's true. How did that escape his mind? What faculty his volunteer teacher was in?
What's on your mind? You can tell me. What?
Thien blurted out, surprised that the older man was asking for his opinion. He rubbed his neck, nervous.
No, better not. I don't think it's going to work. It's better than not having an opinion at all.
A deep voice came up as Captain Fufa walked closer, his body soaked in sweat, and intense sharp eyes looked at the younger man as if to mentally pull out something from that brain.
Don't push me,
the engineering student from a famous university said, feeling uneasy.
Have you ever seen Chinese palanquin? There's a roof and a person sitting inside, and only needs 2 carriers. I know what it is, but I doubt they do.
Fufa smiled lightly, turning towards the young Akka men who encircled the new volunteer teacher, curious of what he was saying, even if they didn't know every word. Thien looked around, taking in the look of expectance coming from everyone, and let out a heavy sigh. He bent down to brush off the sticks on the ground, and used one to draw on the sand. It was a picture of a boxy palanquin with long wood sticking out from the middle, the one used in ancient China.
It's cold in China, so they close it with 4 walls just like this.
The more he drew, the better idea he was coming up with.
Ours don't have to be that grand. Just make a boxy structure like this one, top of the seat, then roof it with thatch without walls. This one will be much lighter than the previous version. How do you carry this Chinese palanquin?
Kama Binglai asked. He never saw one that sounded and looked so peculiar like the drawing, yet he was trying his best to learn and understand so he could explain to his people.
First, you stand in between the beams and put your hands on both sides, then you lift it vertically. You think the wrist will support the weight? From what you said, it takes only 2 people to carry it.
The cogs were working in his mind, and he rolled his eyes back and forth. His brain that had been inertia for quite some time started to fire up.
I think it's okay to put the beams on the shoulders. It's a bigger space, so it'll be less the weight. But when you're lifting something heavy, you cannot lift it too high.
He tapped his chin a few times, then used a stick to draw something more on the ground.
If we add a beam on top of the roof at the same height as the shoulders, then make a loop around the upper and the lower beam to give it more support, then you can carry it with 4 people. When you lift it, the weight will go down on both shoulders and hands, and that will make it easier. If this works, you'll only need half of the workforce, and when you go in a line, it'll help with the balance between both sides of the carriers.
The quick solution that flew out of the new teacher's lips made everyone look in awe. Yet, the man with the idea looked around as if no one gave him a feedback.
Alright, it's a bad idea, right? So you'd better use the old version. Who said it's a bad idea? It's brilliant!
Biang Lei shot forward and patted heartily on the thin shoulders with excitement. He turned towards the men that stood around them and clapped to signal, and shouted long sentences in his native language. The villagers answered enthusiastically that one could sense their thrill like never before. They didn't take apart the old palanquin, but started taking in new beams to make a new one.
You like invention?
Captain Fufa, who was crossing his arms nearby, asked. Thien, who stood stunned at the sight of sudden change around him, turned towards the officer. His eyes wavered.
I did. Why the past tense? The past tense because I don't anymore.
He raised his eyebrows, wanting to get on the captain's nerves and to hide his inner feelings. Yet, before the other man could ask another question, he walked away towards the village head who was calling for him. Yes, he loved taking apart his toys when he was a little boy, especially the ones that moved, like cars and robots that used batteries. When they had broken, he'd take the components one by one and put them back together again to create a new invention. Every time he wanted to show off his creation to his parents, who had been very busy. They were never here to listen to him. When he showed it to his friends from wealthy families, they laughed at him and called his brainchild a junk. From that day, the little Thien had learned that if he wanted to be accepted in the social circle he was born into, to be praised and applauded, he had to act above everyone else. He had to be the wealthiest, living the most lavish life, more imported cars, the latest models of mobile phones, dressing in brand names from head to toe. The materialistic society gave people so much satisfaction that they'd forgotten the true inner self.
Crew, how wide should the seat be?
Kama Biang Lei's question pulled the new teacher from his reverie.
Just for 2 people, so 2 meters should be enough.
The villager's head's mouth split into a wide smile.
We don't have any measuring tape, and the folks here never learned about measuring units either. Oh.
Thien let out a sigh as he realized that. He scratched his head and walked towards the pile of cut bamboos to pick the smallest one, and used it to measure a 1 meter distance. When he got the measurement he needed, he signaled the villager who was holding an axe to cut into that spot.
Can you tell them to use this stalk to measure? From my estimate, the discrepancy wouldn't be less or more than 10 centimeters.
He instructed the elderly man how to use the tool and said,
You know everything. You even speak the central dialect. I got a scholarship from underprivileged kids from His Majesty the King. There was a special education program for hill tribe children at the borders. 1 child per 1 village would be sent to school downtown until Morsor 5 or Mor 6 nowadays. Then I worked as a temp employee at a governmental organization in downtown Shanghai, until I returned home to settle down as you see.
Uncle Biang Lei told about his life story with pride. His Majesty the King's generosity had enabled him to return to his homeland and develop the place that had been inherited since the time of his ancestors.
I had no idea.
He didn't know that the many royal duties aired on TV in the evening news would greatly benefit the life of such unfortunate people. It was odd when he thought about it. City people like him was born in bigger life assets and more opportunities, and yet they could only see the king from TV, while villagers in faraway outback living off the dirt, having no way to reach the king, would be the people who he had visited by himself, even in the remotest parts that required great efforts.
When you have free time, go and stand on the highest spot of Fa Pandao and look around down the hills. The verdant forest and farms you're witnessing came from his royal ideas. That's great. Let's call us fortunate. Fortunate that we were born on this land.
Thien smiled lightly, feeling as proud as Kama Biang Lei. But perhaps he was smiling too wide, because the pang shot through him from the bruises on his cheek. The village head expression darkened as he saw the teacher grimace.
I wanted to talk to you about this. The middlemen who took advantage of the folks weren't only Master Sakta and his men. But if you see something like this again, you have to tell me or the captain. Do not take the matter in your own hands. If I waited to tell you later, then the villagers would have been cheated already.
He frowned, unable to understand the older man's words.
Besides, let me ask you something. If I tell you what happened, how would you or the captain handle them anyway?
That question was harder to crack than what comes first between a hen or an egg. Kama Biang Lei pondered quietly for a moment, then let out a long sigh.
Crew Thien, I can tell you everything about the mafia around here, but trust me, please. You weren't the first volunteer teacher who tried to help the villagers, and some had to leave the hill not intact.
The elder man patted Thien's shoulder to say he meant it.
This is all I can tell you. You're a smart guy. You should get it.
Thien clicked his tongue, annoyed that he got another warning about the incident. They kept calling him a smart guy. What if he wanted to be dumb for just one time? He shook his head and went to help the villagers put the palanquin together. What will be, they said, and let the future take its course. The Chinese palanquin was modified into a simpler version from the chief engineer who supervised every step, even when the rope was tied to bamboo strips. Once the palanquin came to shape, Thien signaled to 4 men who had similar height to lift the vehicle from the ground. A single bamboo stalk that stuck out from the roof structure was put on top of the 2 men's shoulder as they carried the lower beams. Even if the vehicle looked peculiar, it was easy to maneuver, and the new design distributed the weight better than the previous version. The engineering student caressed his chin, pondering, before signaling the men to put the palanquin down. He measured the length with his eyes, then told the men who understood Thai language to saw off some excessive length. Even if the longer beams helped lessen the weight, it was also too awkward to carry. When it was done, Thien gave it a final check. He walked around the palanquin, giving it a look over for a moment, then gave the villagers that surrounded him, waiting to hear an approval, a thumbs up. They finally made it. The men who worked hard on the palanquin shouted in loud cheer, clapping their hands, and gathered around the volunteer teacher to thank him in the Thai language with a big tang of their dialect. The one who was being thanked shook their hands with overwhelming feelings. Captain Fufa, who observed the whole scene, approached the chief engineer, who was smiling sheepishly, not knowing how to react, and placed his hand on the back of the round skull.
Good job.
When he saw no reaction from the younger man, he looked down and saw tears glisten in the almond eyes. The captain's thick lips lifted into a gentle smile.
Everything has its own value. Even if others can't see it, you do. So, don't fight it.
Don't fight to be someone else you are not just to please others. It was something he wished someone would have told him a long time ago. No need for an expensive reward, no need for praises, just someone who accepted him for who he was. Thien sniffed the runny nose and half-heartedly brushed off the hand on the back of his head and gave a mock frown. I'm not a little boy. Fufa held back the laughs and handed the younger man a plastic cup of cold, refreshing rainwater. You want some water, Mr. Grown Man? The teacher scowled at the captain's teasing. He grabbed the cup and gulped down the water. Are you hungry? He shouted the answer. I can eat a horse. The soft-boiled vegetables and chili paste he had at lunch couldn't stay too long in his stomach. Hold on. The dog went to run some errands downtown. He said he'd bring back a steamed duck in sweet brown sauce from a famous shop for you. Once he heard the dog's name from the captain, Thien bore his fangs. I thought you two were aching for some side beef. The captain didn't catch the sexual innuendo. I said duck, not beef. Meaning, I said a duck, not each other. I heard you, I'm not deaf. Fufa frowned deeply, unable to catch up with Thien's hot-headedness. What are you upset about, then? I said I'm hungry. Thien finished his words by brushing past the captain's shoulder towards Kama Binglai, who had been watching the verbal duel from afar, and saw how the officer was shaking his head with exasperation. It was close to 6 p.m., the sun was setting, the sky dimmed. Dr. Vasant parked his car at the back entrance to the village and walked up along the slope with a handful of bags of food. Once he reached the hut, he shouted towards his tall, massive friend who had been sitting on the litter under the house to help him. Why did you buy so many things? Fufa looked into the bags as he opened them and put the food on the plates.
I bought all that's left to make up to Nong Thien. Heard he put up quite a fight.
The young captain smiled.
Maybe he saw himself in Bruce Lee. Luckily, they didn't pull out a gun to shoot him.
Vasant put a plate and poured the jasmine rice with a long, heavy sigh.
Not a good start, wasn't it? I'm afraid he wouldn't last so long.
Even if the area was protected by the military, some dark influences still loomed in. It was a remote area where development was minimal and the villagers were barely educated, so it gave an opening for people to take advantage of them. The forest was still abundant, and the rangers worked hard to be patrolling tens of kilometers each day to look out for looters. When Fufa and he had transferred to the base, they were faced with incidents almost every day, fighting with the looters and drug smugglers until it became less and less as the years went by. They must have seen how unyielding this captain was, so they decided to move on to the next target area. But not all of them had left, though.
It's better that way.
The simple but firm words drew the doctor's eyes towards the captain. The corner of the thin lips lifted up in a knowing smile.
Are you being serious? I am.
The man answered, but he was looking the other way, unable to meet his friend's eyes. The doctor straightened up and crossed his arms like he had an upper hand.
Don't think I don't know what's on your mind, you bastard. You were after him since day one when he first arrived, and never left his side. Even last night, you were so shameless that you pushed yourself into the hut and spent the night here. You want to give me all the bullshit? Fine, go ahead, I'm not buying it.
This was the first time ever that he had regretted having this goddamn son of a gun as his best friend. They'd spent years at the first camp together. Once he got transferred, he even asked to follow him here. He couldn't deny the doctor knew him in and out.
Can you keep your fucking nose out of my business just for once?
Fufa slammed the plate of steamed duck that he had just poured from the bag on the litter, frustrated.
Well, there's one thing I don't know. The reason you're watching over him like a mother hen was because of the love at first sight, or was it an order from you-know-who?
The captain went quiet as he averted his gaze towards the plates, feeling uneasy.
This is the first thing you should really keep your nose out of. You fucking prick! Are you keeping something from me?
Vasant cussed loudly before adding another threat.
Fine. I'm going to tell the boy to watch his back and never trust you. An empty threat?
Fufa said nonchalantly, and the doctor clicked his tongue, annoyed.
Don't be so cocky. You don't even know how he feels about you.
The captain didn't have any comeback for that. He said nothing and turned to lift a bottle of water and put it on the litter to say that his conversation was over. Seeing how unresponsive his bestie was, the young doctor volunteered to get the teacher, who had taken a nap, for the meals. Once the doctor left, Fufa slumped down on the litter, feeling exhausted. If he didn't have any misplaced hope in the first place, why would he have to know what the younger man thought of him then? Thien rushed down the stairs because his stomach and its residents were growling with the protest. The almond eyes widened with excitement, seeing the food that he knew well, from steamed duck in brown sauce, crispy pork and roasted pork, and deep-fried crispy shrimp dumplings. He turned towards his benefactor with a wide, grateful grin.
Thank you so much, Pete Doctor. These are all my favorites. I'm glad you like them. You can eat as much as you want. I don't want people to say that we're not taking good care of you up here.
Vasant wanted to pet the boy's head, but there were two pairs of darkened eyes staring at him.
You don't have to worry. I'm going to finish everything.
Thien patted his flat stomach to confirm his words.
Too bad the rice isn't warm anymore. I bought it since afternoon and it stayed until now in the evening.
The military doctor handed the plate full of rice towards the teacher, who had already sat down on the litter.
I'm used to cold rice by now. I think it's an acquired taste, and it's better than not having anything to eat at all.
Thien babbled as he put a big, plump piece of duck in his mouth. Two men who were holding their spoons mid-air turned to look at each other as if they were having the same thoughts. Something in this city boy was changing. The younger man looked up, sensing the silence.
What are you waiting for? If you're not gonna eat, then I'm gonna finish the plate.
He swept the crispy pork with sauce into his own plate and munched on it.
Hey Doc, do you have any meds for gas problems with you? Foof asked. Nope. Is someone sick? Not now, but maybe soon. I'm afraid someone's insatiable stomach would burst.
Thien whipped his eyes towards the massive captain and retorted by taking the food from every plate and putting it on the officers until it was full.
Eat up and keep your mouth occupied, Cap. Well, seeing how well you're being taken care of, you'd better ask your mama to talk to his mama for a marriage arrangement.
Dr. Vassant said with a smirk to his friend.
My mom passed away since I was 10. And if you're going to keep talking about my dad, tonight I'm going to light the incense and ask for his spirits to break your neck.
Fufa finished the sentence with his finger across his neck.
All right, I yield.
The doctor raised the white flag and turned towards the teacher.
I think the men would have a great time tonight. Why so? Isn't the wedding tomorrow?
Vassant chuckled lowly as he knew something.
According to an ancient Aka tradition, when a man is getting married, he must release all impurity from his body by sleeping with Sako He, or a widow, who was appointed to pop the groom's cherry and teach him a love lesson. What?
The younger man's mouth fell open, hearing the peculiar ritual.
Can this be the origin of a bachelor's party?
He'd witnessed it as a norm from his circles.
I don't know about that.
Perhaps it was just men's egocentricity that became a norm. Vassant shrugged and put the rice into his mouth.
Then why did you say that all the men will be having a good time? Isn't this the ritual for the groom alone?
The older man smiled knowingly. His eyes narrowed like a fox, and he leaned in to whisper against the white tip of the ear.
Tonight you can take a walk in the village. If you see the group of men with a torch or a lamp, follow them. Are you gonna finish your fucking meal so we can return to the base?
Fufa cut in loudly before his friend would put more wrong ideas into the troublemaker's head. Still, Thien didn't get it. He let it go and went back to eat the delicacy before him until his stomach was hurt. When they were done cleaning the plates, the younger man walked the guests off like he normally did. The captain didn't get into the car with his friend, since he had his own motorbike. Before leaving, he didn't forget to remind Thien that he shouldn't wander out at night because it wasn't safe to do so. The teacher nodded casually, bored of the warning, and waved his hand to dismiss the captain. He walked back to put the kettle on the brazier for a hot bath at the back of the hut. He gritted his teeth as he ran naked back into his room after the bath was done in the cold and felt the cramp creeping in. Suddenly his eyes caught a glimpse of something. It was the plastic basin he'd borrowed from Kama Binglay, which he forgot to return. A man in his favorite jacket and the damp pajamas pants were standing in front of the biggest house in Phra Pandao village. He was shuddering and shouting for the house's owner. A wooden door behind a staircase slowly opened and Kama Binglay pried out with a lamp to look.
Crew, what have brought you here in the dark? I forgot to give you back the basin. I'm afraid your wife will need it in the morning.
He knew most Aka housewives went to wash their clothes at the waterfall at dawn.
Oh dear, you didn't have to bother. We've got a lot of basins here. You can keep this one. Ah, all right.
Thien rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed that he came for nothing. Before he turned to leave, the village head called out as if he'd thought of something.
It's good you came. Come on in. We have something for you.
We? Thien frowned, wondering who would that be, but walked up the stairs as asked. He sat down on the mattress on the floor with the basin by his side, looking left and right to take in Akka's household condition. He found that the house did speak about Kama Binglei's education and work experience in the city. The house was full of modern utilities, and he even had a bookshelf. His eyes caught a picture in a gold frame. It was a photo of the king as he had visited people in the remote areas of Thailand. The poster made from the photo was so lifelike that one could clearly see the sweats on His Majesty's face and how hard he had worked for his people. Thien thought about the hanging calendar with His Majesty's photo on a cupboard at the back of his classroom. The nail had fallen off, so the calendar was placed that way. He was thinking about borrowing a hammer from Kama Binglei to put the calendar up again. Perhaps the children would feel more encouraged to study seeing the picture of the king.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
Binglei showed up from his bedroom with his wife, who was carrying Akka traditional costumes.
My wife just finished fixing up the last shirt. Why so many clothes?
The wealthy young man asked, puzzled. The older man gently smiled as he took the clothes from his wife and put them in front of the teacher.
These menswears were the finest woven costumes made by our people. Some of them were old from being locked away, but my wife had repaired them for you. Today the guys were so happy seeing how you were wearing their clothes, and you helped them building the bride's palanquin, so they wanted to repay your kindness.
Thien went silent, feeling his eyes burn.
They like to see me wearing the same clothes they do? A lot of people here like wearing city clothes to look modern, but how many city people who like folk costumes like us?
Kama put his hands on the pile of clothes with colorful embroideries.
If you don't mind, can you accept these old clothes?
He swallowed his sobbing. Despite being here for only a short time, he still felt the self-esteem that had been erased coming back to life again.
How can I say no?
Thien bent down to embrace the clothes as if they were the most precious gifts, and turned towards Kama's wife, who was smiling at him.
Thank you, Auntie,
he said in Akka dialect that he had learned from the men in the afternoon. He knew the sentence was broken, but it still drew out a hearty laugh from both the elders. You're welcome, crew, Binglei's wife said. Thien put the clothes in the basin, bowed farewell to the host, and went down the stairs. He cast a flashlight along the rough road in the middle of the village. It was a moonless night, and the glistening stars were visible in the dark sky. The temperature had also dropped to a chilling degree, and he saw the stream of white smokes from his breath. The city boy, who had never experienced such coldness in Thailand, wiped the clear liquid that oozed out of his nose. He then caught a glimpse of something unusual. The light coming from a group of men in the dark who tiptoed behind the row of wooden houses. They recognized the other's presence and stopped to look. The shadow stepped out with a kerosene lamp in hand, and he could see the familiar faces in the dark. They were the group of young men who were making the palanquin with him in the noon. What were they doing out here at night? Before he got his answer, they started waving at him. Thien looked left and right and pointed at himself. Were they calling at him? When they nodded yes and quickened their beckon, he paced towards them without a second thought. When they saw how the volunteer teacher was joining them, they slapped on his slim shoulders with a pleased laugh and ushered him to walk with them. Thien went along, puzzled, with a flashlight in one hand and a basin in the other. He remembered P. Dr. Nam's word in the evening and started to realize why this group of men came out at night with the lamp. Thrill shot through him like a teen sneaking out to do something against the rules. They walked till they reached the foot of the hill quite far away and spotted a soul hut that was built behind a large tree. "Why are we here?" Thien asked quietly. but it rang loud in the total silence. The men turned towards him in unison and put their index finger on their lips to tell him to keep quiet. The new volunteer teacher shut his mouth as told and tiptoed behind the men towards the hut. The pioneer straightened up to look for an opening in the woven bamboo wall and found one. He beckoned his friends to come closer. The lamplight from the interior was bright enough to see a faint glimpse of moving shadows inside. The low moans and soft chatters and the leering smiles from the young man let him know what was going on in that hut. The Aka man saw how he was standing back and pulled him closer, hoping that he would have a better view of the sexual activities between the groom and the Sakohe through the hole. 2 plump breasts of the widow were right before his eyes, making him cry out loud. "Fuck!" Before he finished the words, a hand slapped over his mouth. Unable to move, Thean had to watch the live porn with an uneasy feeling in his guts. The quick breathing coming from the young man around him as the man in the hut approached his target made him want to look away, but his eyes were fixated on the sight. The 2 smooth thighs opened wide, ready to let the man in. The hardness that showed off the fertility of the young groom slowly disappeared inside the woman's body. When he started to move, low moans of the love-lesson widow made all the peeping Toms started to shudder from the thrill.
"Do you guys have enough fun?"
He swore. The low, deep, familiar voice that uttered the sentence in Thai was so quiet and yet powerful. It shot right through their ears and sent the men who didn't even fully understand the language into every direction. But alas, the basin was such a hindrance, and Thien was grabbed by a thick hand. Sweats broke out across the smooth forehead, even if the temperature was freezing cold. He cackled a dry laugh before turning towards the imposing officer who had transformed into an angry monster.
"Haven't you returned to the base? I had a hunch that you would do something stupid, so I came back after the shower. I didn't see you at the hut, so I came directly to the ceremonial ground. And I was right."
Fufa stressed every word in the last sentence to intimidate the younger man.
"You don't have to be on my tail, you know."
Thien laughed sheepishly as he paled. Why would he be afraid? He wasn't intimidated by this man just one bit.
"Go home now."
The captain dragged the troublemaker by the arm, and Thien felt his shoulder almost dislocate.
"Ouch! Easy, Captain."
He cried out a false whine so the officer would go gentler, but it was all in vain. The iron grip still held on tightly on his forearm. Fufa was dragging the cylinder phone towards his motorbike that was parked nearby so he could give the boy a ride home. Yet he sensed the awkwardness in the way Thien walked, so he halted and spun around. The sharp eyes raked down the younger man's body and stopped at the bulge. A knowing cold smile appeared on the dark face.
"What are you looking at?"
Thien shouted and pulled the jacket down to conceal his jewel. His face reddened with embarrassment.
"How much have you seen through the hole?" "It's none of your business."
The younger man pushed the captain, who lowered himself closer as if to tease him.
"Do you need my help?"
The tip of the prominent straight nose pressed to the tip of Thien's white ear as the low, raspy voice whispered,
"We're both men. Don't be embarrassed."
He felt goosebumps all over. Thien shut his eyes and shrieked like a buffalo being slaughtered, his voice ringing loud across the mountains.
"A man on top like you is too dangerous."
He bashed the plastic basin into the captain's tight stomach and Fufa toppled over. He looked up at the rascal who stomped away towards the motorbike and straddled it.
"Hurry up! It's freezing out here!"
Thien shouted, his face tightened into a deep scowl. The young officer let out a long, heavy sigh, the way Thien had said it. Did he learn something from the big-mouthed doctor? Once he returned to the base, he was going to kick that guy's ass. Fufa shook his head in exasperation. Before his head feared that the hope he had never had would truly be out of reach. The Aka wedding, according to the long-standing tradition, lasted 3 days. On the first day, they take the bride to the groom's house. Then Jai Mo, or the village respected elder, performed a welcoming ritual for the bride by cleansing himself and knock on the groom's roof to call the bride's spirit. On the second day, the bride would perform the housewife's duty by cooking for the village elderly people as a thank you. On the last day, she had to perform a duty by cutting a red banana in the forest and bring the banana stalk to burn and serve it to the guests. The guest would mix vegetable oil with salt at the bottom of the pot and put it on others' faces as they tried to escape. The groom and the bride would be no exception, as this was a ritual to test their patience for spending their lives together from now on. Tian stood and drank up the whole bowl of water after being invited to walk to the next village to bring the bride to theirs. The winding road throughout the sparse forest as they went uphill and downhill made him want to sit down and breathe heavily, despite not having the weight of the palanquin on him. Yet the other man still talked and laughed like it was a piece of cake. The volunteer teacher was wearing the traditional clothes given to him, with the hat that Kama Binglay had given him in the morning. It looked like a headband with beautiful and colorful knitting wool tassel. He looked like one of them, and no one would have thought he was from the city. The soldiers who guarded the trip didn't include Captain Fufa, but the rangers he was familiar with as they were patrolling the school on shifts. Even if he wondered why the massive officer didn't join in, he held back from asking. Tian stretched lazily to chase away the soreness from the trip and went into the home of the newly wedded couples. The spouses were in the middle of the next ceremony, passing an egg to each other back and forth 3 times. When he frowned with a question in his mind, Kama Binglay came out with the answer.
It's an ancient prediction, crew. If they drop the egg, it means they're not going to have children, and they will not gain any merit.
The city boy nodded with bewilderment. Was that the same thing as woman's ovulating period? The party then went on from the afternoon till the evening. The guests sang and danced in the yard, and the chicken raised by the villagers would become a boiled dish to serve as the spouses' first meal together. Tian, who could only talk to the village head in Thai language, balled sticky rice with his hand and dipped it in chili paste, bored, so he quietly left to stroll around the culture yard. Young girls and the children who were dancing to the rhythm of the music were an adorable sight, but what drew his attention more was the loud cheer in the front. The men, young and old, were standing in circle playing a game.
Aku!
One of them called out to the teacher who was coming closer.
What are you doing?
Even if he couldn't understand Thai, he could guess the meaning as he walked closer to look at the thing that was spinning in the middle of the circle.
Chong,
they tried to explain to him.
Whirling.
Tien tried to put the words together.
You meant whirligig?
They quickly nodded, smiling widely and inviting him to join them. The Aka's chong, or whirligig, had a peculiar look. The ones he'd seen before had a sharp long spike made of iron or metal, but here it was made of sharpened wood with a slimming tip, and the whirligig was bigger than the modern version. The spinning rope was either plastic or hemp tied to another tip of the wood. Tien was born in the age of RC car and went to an elite school. He had never touched and played with the plastic whirligig that was a bonus with snacks, nor tried a jumping rope game with his friends. He looked at the simple local toy that someone had thrust into his hands, being at his wits' end. The loud cheer came up in Aka language that he couldn't understand, but he guessed from their body language, with stretching movements of the hands let him know that they were telling him to pull the rope. The city boy decided to pull the stick with the rope out of the whirligig, and the toy spun a few rounds on the ground before coming to a stop. It didn't even look as great as when the akka was doing it. The laughter coming from the people around him made him feel numb from an embarrassment with his failed first try. Tien balled his hands into a fist, furious, burning with the need to prove himself. He strode towards the man who had handed him the toy and demanded with his hands that the man taught him immediately. The akka man showed him how to throw the whirligig. Normally, you had to wind the rope on one end of the toy spike from the bottom to the top, then wind the rope to the thrower's finger. But with the akka version, they used a bamboo stalk that had been wetted out into a slime one instead of finger to increase the centrifugal force that would spin the larger and heavier whirligig better. It looked like how you throw a ball in a baseball game he had played during the summer school in the US. Once he thought of himself a pitcher with a whirligig in hand instead of a ball, he felt more comfortable. When he flung the stalk and sent the whirligig out with a perfect posture, the man who had taught him looked with wide eyes. The heavy large toy flew away for some 10 meters before hitting the ground. It spun like a whirlwind, but not for long before coming to a stop. Tien flung the toy with different postures, but still his throws didn't result in long spins like the akka's. He stopped and observed if there was any difference between his whirligig and the men's, with arms across his chest, frowning. Then he turned to the toy's owner and pointed towards the plastic rope. The guy seemed to realize what the teacher was suggesting and answered with a sheepish smile, waving his hand to say that he didn't have it at the moment. The engineer student had finally figured out what the problem was. The plastic rope was slippery, so it didn't hold on to the surface as well as the hemp one. He looked left and right, searching for a solution for a few moments. If he wanted a rough surface, then he needed sandpaper. If he wanted the rope to be smoother, he had to roll it in the sand. Tien used a fool's logic by rolling the plastic rope on the ground and rolled it with his feet to lessen its slick, smooth surface, then widened it around the whirligig. He did another long throw again. The wooden toy flew into the air in a smooth arc before hitting the ground and spinning with an astonishingly high speed. The akka around him were looking with awe on their faces. Tien balled his hand and pulled his arm close to himself, crying out a loud "Yes!" from his successful experiment. He then dragged his partner in crime towards the group of men to challenge them. By evening, the group of soldiers who were friendly with the local men had come to congratulate the newlyweds. Captain Fufa showed up in his camouflage pants, a knee-high combat boots, and a khaki greenish t-shirt with a tactical jacket. It showed that he had just returned from a patrolling duty. Dr. Vasant, with his semi-casual clothes, walked up to Kama Binglay and handed him a plastic bag that contained beer and famous whiskey he had bought the day before to show his courteousness.
"Thank you, Doctor,"
Fa Pandau's village head said, and invited the soldiers to join in the dinner with them on the long litter. He smiled, seeing how the captain was looking around as if he was looking for something.
"Are you looking for Crew Tien? He's over there."
Biang Lai pointed to the other side of the yard where the young and older men gathered.
"What's the game they're playing?"
The young officer tried to look, but the man was so packed that he couldn't see anything.
"The teacher has challenged some guys in whirligig games."
The sharp eyes narrowed.
"You must be drunk. Does he even know what a whirligig is?" "Come on, Captain."
Biang Lai slapped his own forehead.
"If you don't believe me, I'll show you."
He led the tall soldier and walked through the circle of men. An image of a man who just grew out of his teenage years was lifting his leg high in the air and throwing a whirligig that had a rope around it and connected to a stick as if he was a pro player, made Fufa stop in his track with amazement. The loud cheer rang in his ears as he stared at the natural bright face with smooth, reddened cheeks, the kind of natural beauty that hadn't been concealed by urban mask from city life. The troublemaker realized he was being watched and looked up at him. He even raised his chin in defiance with his hands on his hips like a champion. Fufa couldn't help but smile, yet he shook his head in a half-hearted exasperation. He hoped the younger man would reap the most benefits from the life here before his time would come to an end. The time when he had to return to the world he had come from.
I never thought Crew Tien would last this term, but now I think I'll have to think again.
The captain looked at the man who said the words. It wasn't hard for him to figure out that this young man had come from an extraordinary background. It was obvious from the way he dressed and the way he carried himself. So Kama Byung-Lei's reach, who had seen the world, must have seen it too.
It's not just you,
he said plainly, but it felt as if there was a brick in his chest which grew heavier on each passing day. When the time came, how would he bear it then?